There we go. So first of all, thank you to everybody that's joining in today. We really appreciate it. My name is Kim Shafer, and I am the Regional League Manager that partners with the Indiana, Michigan, Northern, and Southern Ohio sections. And all four of those sections have come together to put a series of webinars together. So we've already done the first two. The first one was on the PGA Junior League changes for the 2021 season. The second one was on the value and the power of hosting your own in-house league. And then today is the third and final one, which is going to be on the COVID best practices and guidelines for PGA Junior League. So if you missed the first couple, we do have those recorded. So either reach out to myself or your section staff, because we would be more than happy to provide you with those links so you can go back and watch those and be well informed. Today, during this call, we really want it to be a discussion and a conversation. So feel free to unmute yourselves at any time and ask a question or share a comment. We are really excited to have you join in the conversation. If you're not comfortable with that, you can also, if you're on your desktop, you can also go to the top right, and there's kind of a little taskbar. And one of those is the chat area, and you can type in there any question that you have, and we will be monitoring that, and we will answer any and all questions that you put in there today. So thank you again for coming, and I think that we're ready to really kick things off. So today our topic is COVID guidelines and best practices for PGA Junior League. So we have several guest speakers with us today. We have Laura Frick, who is the lead golf competitions manager from the National PGA office down in Frisco, Texas. And she's going to join us today, as well as two really successful PGA Junior League captains who successfully navigated their way through the 2020 PGA Junior League season. And were just really strong examples of how to organize a very healthy program for their junior golfers. So we have Raquel Bryant here from Thousand Oaks Golf Club in Michigan, and we have Matt Lay from Dayton Country Club from the Southern Ohio section. So I'm really excited to have our guest speakers with us today, and I'm confident that they're going to be able to share some really great insights and best practices with you. So that's probably enough talking from me. So we're going to start kicking right in with the guest speakers. So we're going to start with Laura today. And Laura, I know last year for you was a real whirlwind. Once COVID struck, you were tasked with working very closely with the CDC and assisting with kind of the back to golf guidelines, and more specifically, creating the PGA Junior League COVID guidelines. So take a minute and just kind of tell us about, your whirlwind of a year in 2020 and kind of the opportunity that you had to learn from that experience.
Thanks, Kim. Good morning, everybody. Very excited to be here. Have to give a quick shout out to all my Michigan people on the call. I am originally from Michigan, so I'm always excited when I get to see and talk to you all. And of course, everyone else too. Nice to see everybody. So yeah, obviously 2020 was a whirlwind for just about everyone, I can imagine. But one thing that was kind of great about what happened back in March/April was the golf industry really came together. So everything was shutting down. We saw basketball courts taking the rims off the backboard so kids weren't playing basketball. We saw padlocks being put on just about every playground in the country. And every sort of organizer in golf started to panic a little bit because we all had that same mission in mind, was how do we keep golf open and show to the world, to the United States, that it's a sport that has a lot of value to communities and it could be an outlet, which we saw end up happening for those who can't play other sports, can't do other things. So whether it was the Golf Course Owners Association, LPGA, PGA Tour, PGA of America, we all had the same mission in mind, and we all came together pretty quickly to come up with the best solutions possible moving forward. So when Back to Golf was created, it was led by a few key industry members. Jeff Price and John Easterbrook from the PGA of America side, they really took the lead in getting all of the people to the table to start to have this conversation. And it started off with, how do we keep golf courses open in a healthy, responsible way, and how do we provide professionals the resources they need to stay open? And after that, we started to realize a few things. There are other sort of sub-questions to keeping golf courses and golf open. There's professional tournaments, your PGA Tour, your LPGA Tour. We saw all the craziness happening there. There are amateur and junior tournaments, your section junior tours, your AJGA events. How do we keep those open, and how do we keep those fully functioning? And then you have your localized sort of youth golf programming. So PGA Junior League, the First Tee, LPGA, USGA girls golf. What do we do from a standpoint with those? So Back to Golf sort of split up into a lot of different subgroups with all different industry working members. And I was fortunate enough to be on the youth programming committee, working with First Tee organizers and really figuring out, okay, we all have the same sort of situation. There are juniors involved, which ultimately means parents and potentially other siblings and guardians and things like that. We have coaches, we have registration, we have practices and on-course activities. And what do we do from an entire youth golf perspective to make sure we can be responsible in the way we operate all of these programs? And I will say we worked quick and we worked fast because, as you all know, the world was moving so quickly and we didn't know a lot about the virus, but we knew we needed to get this information out there. So there were meetings at 9 p.m. and then 6 a.m. the next morning, and there was constant back and forth with like, oh, wait, we didn't think about, sharing equipment. Oh, we didn't think about registration and sharing pens. And we really tried our best to come up with the best possible guidelines to present to the Back to Golf committee as a whole, and then ultimately the golf industry. And the other thing we learned was, I'm sure everyone knows by now, local and state guidelines ultimately would kind of supersede anything that we put out. And it would be different in every county, every state, every city, etc. But what could we do to at least give the best resource we could to those who are trying to stay open or trying to reopen? So we launched the Back to Golf guidelines, and I do have kind of a fun story. I spent the summer in Michigan with my parents because work from home, you can work pretty much just about anywhere these days. And we have a small cottage up in Baldwin, Michigan. And for those of you who don't know, it's very small, like up north town. And there's one golf course there called Marquette Trails. And I showed up one day in July just to play a quick 9. And on every single window, they had the Back to Golf guidelines printed out. And it was that moment where I realized, everything we did in April, moving so quickly and coming together as an industry, it made its way all the way up to Marquette, Michigan, or Baldwin, Michigan. So it must have been at least a resource that went nationwide. So I was pretty proud of that. I know our team was very proud to see that. And we're really grateful to be a part of the Back to Golf sort of creation. And what led from Back to Golf was our PGA Junior League guidelines. And really, this was our chance to take what we've learned with Back to Golf, what we learned with the First Tee and LPGA, USGA, and others. What can we apply directly to PGA Junior League? Because we do have some specific key things that other programs don't. We have the team scramble format. We have our captains and coaches. We have intermingling between players and opponents. So what can we do to make sure we provide our captains and coaches the resources they need so you all don't have to go to Back to Golf, to all the different pages and all the different resources and figure out, okay, how do I apply that to PGA Junior League at my facility? So that was our goal. We did so. Luckily, we had lots of contacts with the CDC from our Back to Golf work, so we were able to get these guidelines reviewed. And I will say some eye-opening, just one learning that we had from the CDC was, you'll notice we always say healthy and responsible. We used to say, we want to keep everyone safe. Safety is our goal. Safety, safety. And the CDC actually said to us, you can't claim safety in the COVID-19 world, but you can be responsible and you can focus on health and well-being. So our goal was to do that. We can never promise the perfectly safe environment, but we can promise that we'll do everything we can to keep everyone healthy and do so in a responsible way. So we continue to look at back to golf guidelines. We continue to monitor the situation and update all of our resources. But that's sort of a high level overview of how it all started and how it was all created.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. You made a couple points in there that I want to touch on. Number one is no matter what, the number one most important thing is to always look at your local and state guidelines. Last year, I know in my territory, I had some counties that were right next to each other. And, one county, they had a mayor who completely shut down golf in that county. Yet right next to it was a free-for-all. And I had a lot of golfers from Michigan and Illinois, when they were closed, that were coming across the borders and playing a lot of golf in northwest Indiana. And so, there's the first thing is to just make sure that, you know what your local, county, and state mandates currently are. Because regardless of all the wonderful information that Laura just shared with you, if they say no to this, this, and this, well, then it's a no. So that's the number one thing. One thing that you mentioned, Laura, is you said, gosh, down here in Texas, we knew things were getting bad when they started taking, the basketball goals off the thing. Well, my son goes to University of Kentucky, and if you've ever walked through their campus, they have outside basketball goals everywhere. And like my son and his buddies would play basketball, oh my gosh, like 4 or 5 days a week. And they took all the rims down on the basketball goals during that same time frame. And like they were like, oh my gosh, something is really, really wrong if we live in Kentucky and they're taking the basketball goals down. Apparently the entire Kentucky team decided to not practice during that whole time frame because they're having their worst season in the history of the school. Totally different topic. But, now I want you to know, though, he actually sent me a photo just the other day, and they were putting back up the rims on some of the outdoor basketball goal areas. So he was excited about that. So hopefully that's a sign that we're starting to move kind of in the right direction. But one thing that you mentioned too is how you saw the back to golf guidelines posted somewhere. And I can't tell you how many pros have told me, oh my gosh, the PGA Junior League guidelines and the back to golf guidelines, I don't know what I would have done without those this year. So, one thing, I just had Chelsea from Michigan help me. She is posting in the chat area. She just posted in there the PGA Junior League COVID guidelines. So if you're on and you're on your video, you can go in there and you can get that link and you can go through there and kind of look at those as we're talking about them. But these guidelines, not only did we just put them in the link there, but they're also in the Captain Resource Center on the website. And I want to make sure that you're aware of that because those are constantly being updated with best practices. So today you're going to hear best practices from Raquel and Matt, but there are best practices going in there all the time, and you can actually go there yourself and submit best practices. So make sure that you check out the COVID area in the Captain Resource Center because I think that's also going to be a really good resource for you this year. So Laura, when you look through the specific PGA Junior League COVID guidelines, what are some of the key points that really stick out to you, or maybe what are a couple items that you feel like you would want to emphasize with the group here today?
That's a good question. So the other thing along with the safety versus health and well-being conversation is the term socially distanced was a scary term for us when we think of PGA Junior League. So we try to sort of coin the term or push the phrase physically distanced while socially connected because, again, to your point about pickup basketball games being over, socializing even at school being limited, we want people to know that you can still form a social connection through PGA Junior League while being physically distanced. So I think the two key things about maintaining PGA Junior League during this COVID time is really touch points and that distance component. So when I think of touch points, I think of sharing equipment, including a flag stick, and I also think of high fives and handshakes. So I know one professional, they used to all mark the ball this time, throw the mark down this time, hey, throw me your ball marker. This professional knew that, all right, we're going to try to limit sharing of equipment. I'm going to give every player a ball marker with their initials on it, and that's their ball marker, and they don't need to be using a teammate's or anyone else's. That's their ball marker for the season. Small things, but it's touch points, and it's trying to think through, are we limiting the times I'm touching the same item you're touching? If your facility is still doing some sort of modified flag stick, that's great. If you can, try to limit the times players are taking the flag stick in and out, that's great as well. And then with the handshakes and the high fives, we actually did launch a really cool initiative back in 2020. It was our non-handshake handshake contest. So we got a lot of submissions and would still love to see what players are doing. What can you do to have fun, to celebrate, that doesn't include your traditional high five or handshake? Everyone loves a good fist bump, but there's also some really fun dance moves I've seen, and just really encouraging. It is a bummer we can't high five, but how can we turn it into something fun and a cool new tradition possibly? In terms of the 6 feet distance or trying to maintain, huddling together, kids naturally follow each other around, and the scramble format does sort of pull kids closer together because they're going to one ball versus I go to my ball, you go to yours, we'll see each other on the green. So what can you do to kind of try to keep them as spaced out as possible? I know lots of people are able to do this better at the practice facility, on the driving range, on the putting green, but also when you're out on the golf course, sometimes when kids are going to they pick their shot and they want to move their ball, or their player wants to, play right next to them or mark that one club length. Do they really need to get down together and measure a club length, or can I just come at a reasonable distance from my partner, toss the ball down? Just trying to limit times where we're huddling together. And then the last thing I would say is, golf, we've all learned it's a huge positive that we're outside, but we always need to keep an eye on the weather, especially, as I know, especially in Michigan coming this spring. You never know what you're going to get in some of those Michigan, Ohio, all those states. Don't risk it with the weather, because if you think that you're all out on the golf course and there's a chance that you're going to have to pull everyone in, that's when we're going to have a decision that might have to be made, because you've got the safety component of inclement weather and then the responsibility factor of COVID-19. And that's where all of a sudden you've got to put 10 kids on a golf cart to get them back inside, and that's a risk for COVID. So always keep an eye on weather, especially when it comes to being out on the golf course and you've got a bunch of kids and possibly parents or guardians as well. So those would be the 2 things I would keep in mind, Kim, in terms of what we've got for PGA Junior League.
Perfect. So literally everything that Laura just shared, those are such good suggestions for how to maintain that physical distancing on the golf course. And a lot of those things you can read about in the actual PGA Junior League COVID guidelines. I have to tell you, it was really hard for me not to laugh when I hear Laura Frick, Laura is our rules, strict rules person. I have a hard time not just bursting out into laughter when I hear her say that you don't have to measure exactly a club length and you can just throw a ball on the ground. To me, that just shows how COVID has made us all a little more flexible and adaptable, because Laura is not usually that flexible and adaptable. So I find it really funny to hear her say that. But that's exactly what we have to do, is we have to adapt to the current world and the current conditions. And I think that the COVID guidelines really will help you do that at your facilities. So those were all awesome points. Laura, before I go on to another speaker, is there anything else that I haven't asked you that you would like to share with us?
Well, now that everyone's afraid of me because they think I'm a rule no, I would say we have been asked about our championship season and what COVID modifications will be made. We'll keep everyone posted. We fully plan on having a full championship season this year. What it looks like at each level may be different, and what it looks like at each state in terms of your section championships or a regional might look different as well. But we'll continue to monitor everything, and I'm going to put my email address in the chat, and if anyone has questions or looking for additional resources or feedback, I'm always happy to chat. So just appreciate everybody's time, and thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura. And anybody, feel free to reach out to Laura with those questions because she's happy to answer and happy to help. And she's really the one that's been closest to that COVID guideline preparation. So she's happy to help you in any way possible. Does anybody on the call right now have any questions that they would specifically like to ask Laura? If you do, you can either put them in the chat area or you can just unmute and ask her. While we're giving you a minute to kind of think about that, I am going to have Chelsea's helping me out here from the Michigan section. She's going to post 3 different links in the chat area for you. One is going to be just the PGA Junior League program guidelines for COVID. The second is going to be the Back to Golf Youth Activities Addendum. And then the third is going to be a CDC resource for you that is specifically for when someone gets sick within your program, what should you do? How should you handle that? And so I think those are 3 incredibly important resources. So we're going to put them in the chat channel. That way you can click on those and save those and have those kind of at your fingertips as the season goes on. If there's not any questions for Laura right now, what I'd love to do is kind of bring in our next guest speaker, which is going to be Raquel from Thousand Oaks in Michigan. And Raquel, you've been a really long time PGA Junior League captain, and you've had great success with the program. And I know, obviously, 2020 presented some very unique challenges. I know you and I spoke on a couple of different occasions last year and emailed back and forth, and you were very diligent about trying to find ways to make sure that your families and your players felt like they were coming to a healthy environment when they came to your facility. And one of the very first things that you did last year was you hosted a video meeting with all of the families prior to the start of the season. And I was actually able to join that video meeting. And out of all the video meetings I was on last year, yours was amazing. You did a great job of not only educating, but also entertaining your kids and your families and keeping them engaged throughout the video call. So I would love for you to just kind of share with the group how you organized that call, the information that you shared, and how you kept it fun for everybody.
Sounds good. Thanks, Kim. So usually we would have a big opening night for our junior league where we would invite all the teams in the league and just go over all the rules together as a league. The other coaches would come, just have a really big fun night with just different events. And so we knew we couldn't have that. So having this Zoom meeting was kind of replacing that. So we made sure we could get all the information we needed to, but hopefully just get everyone really excited, meet some of the kids, at least see their faces that we didn't know. So we put together a Zoom meeting. So I'm going to share some of the screenshots from the meeting so you guys can see kind of what it was like. So we were able to introduce ourselves, just kind of some random screenshots here. So Brian and myself were the 2 coaches at Thousand Oaks. And so we were able to introduce ourselves. Let's see if I can click to the next one here. And so this was in our golf academy. And so we have a rules scholar board up in our office where we could cover kind of the scramble format and really show the kids what exactly we were doing, what we were going to do on the golf course. They could see it. So I was able to draw and show them, here's a scramble. This is what the format's going to be like. I showed them a scorecard so they could see, how the match was going to go. So just really visual and trying to communicate all the information we were going to need to know. tried to demonstrate how we were going to stay socially distanced. So with the golf club, showing them if you held out your golf club, you shouldn't be able to touch anyone else. So they had a visual of how far away they should stay from everyone else. We covered all the rules and format. So this was a sheet that I sent out to the parent ahead of time so they could see it, but I covered, you know, what the players could do who were actually playing, what the alternates could do, what the scorekeepers could do, just all those little details. But this year I made highlight in red the ones that were different because of COVID. So we have a lot of players who played past years, and so really trying to highlight these are the things that are different. Here's what it usually is, but this year, here's what it is because of COVID. So quite a few updates in red for COVID. So I just went over all of that so they really have an idea of what to expect and what was different. And then I think Laura or Kim maybe shared this with me, just like a short animated clip of Junior League rules. So this was a perfect segue. We covered all the kind of important factual stuff, and then we showed them this video while Brian and I moved over to one of our bays. So then we had a competition. So for us at Thousand Oaks, we have two teams. So Brian has a team and I have a team. So we had a little competition. Whichever coach hit the ball the closest out of 3 shots, that team got popsicles at our first practice. We actually gave both teams popsicles, but they didn't know that right away. So just like a fun thing to get them excited and cheer us on. So my team won. And so that was the gist of the meeting, and we ended with just kind of a fun putting competition. So I told them ahead of time that they would need to have a putter, a golf ball, and just a coffee mug or something like that. So they had to do 10 putts from 3 feet away, and if they could make 4 or more, then they got like a Puma bracelet at our first meeting. So just fun things to kind of keep them involved, and we just had them ask any questions they wanted to at the end. So I feel like we were able to cover all the really important things and also kind of have fun and meet everyone. So yeah, that's kind of what we did.
I love all of that. So I did just put in the chat channel the actual link to her Zoom meeting. Okay, so if any of you are looking to host a Zoom meeting with your family, I highly suggest that you watch their meeting because it was, like I said, super educational yet also entertaining at the same time. And I'm sure that Brian wants the entire nation watching that so that they can see that you beat him in the competition. So I'm sure Brian won't mind at all that we share that with everybody. But it was a great call and very, very helpful for your families. I felt like after the call was over, I felt confident that your families knew what they needed to know for the season. So really, really good job on that particular video for sure. So when you look at this next year, when you think about it, like this last year, for example, when you were finally able to host practices and games, can you share any best practices that you found that were helpful this last year on game days, on practice days that helped maintain that physical distancing?
Yeah, I'll just share what we did for Junior League because the kids are, for us it was like maybe 9 to 13, 10 to 13-year-olds mostly. So I feel like age-wise, they're not as likely to just not listen or kind of go off and do their own thing. Like they understand and they knew that they need to be distant. So for them, what we did for practices was we had 6 orange alignment rods and 6 blue alignment rods. And we just lined them up in 2 rows at over 6 feet apart. And so when they came to practice, they knew they just went and stood by one of the alignment rods. So if we were still out with a different group and they were there early, they knew, okay, here's where I go. And then Brian and I both coach the practices. So it's just 6 players for 1 pro. So I feel like there were small enough groups that it wasn't too much to manage. So we had them distanced there, and then we would just move to a different station, telling them to stay, distanced apart. In the beginning, we'd have them take a club out so they could see, okay, here's what we practice with staying, at least the club length with your arms stretched out away from someone else. But then we'd make sure we already had all the stations laid out. They were always over 6 feet apart. So I felt really comfortable with that age that they could do that safely. On game days, obviously we didn't do like a huddle like we normally would do and things like that. And then we didn't have the kids wear masks. We just usually wore neck gaiters, and then we'd pull them up if we were going to go within 6 feet of a child, but we usually didn't, except the only thing I would say is during practice if we were working on full swing, I feel like we really needed to, because I don't feel like you can help little kids that much without actually touching them, but I would just keep hand sanitizer in my pocket, so if I was going to touch a kid or touch their equipment, I could just quick hand sanitize and have my mask up and feel comfortable with that. And then obviously we were really clear about if they have any symptoms, don't come. And so parents were really good with that, and we didn't really have any issues with Junior League. We had some kids in some other programs that had symptoms, and so we just had them stay home, and they could kind of make up, come to a different program or something like that if they missed quite a few. We usually would have like a group snack, so parents would bring a snack and we do that, so we didn't do that. So just kind of eliminating anything like that. We have a lot of families that do Junior League, and so kind of keeping the families together on the course was helpful. So then you've got, they're playing and they're from the same family group, and like they already are exposed to each other, so they can touch each other's, clubs and whatnot, and it's okay. So that was nice. So just all of those little things helped us stay safe this year.
Those are all great suggestions. When you think about this coming year, is there anything that you learned from last year that you might change or do differently or add in for this year?
I think we'll probably keep it similar to what I just talked about. I'm hoping that we don't need to do a Zoom meeting this year, but we're obviously not planning a big get-together with all of the other courses in our league, so we'll just have the first meeting be, exciting where they get their jerseys and stuff like that, but just the one team. Then we have space to spread out and still go over all the rules, but it's just so meaningful to be in person. So if we can do that, I'm hoping we can do that. If not, that's okay. But yeah, so hopefully just implementing all those same things that we did this year.
Perfect. Raquel, thank you so much. You just gave a lot of really, really good suggestions, and especially the Zoom meeting. I put that link in there. I would highly recommend anybody watch that. So I really appreciate all that you do for your kids and also for stepping in and helping us today as well. So thank you. I am going to pick Matt's brain here for a few minutes. So we're going to speak with Matt Lay, who has also been a super successful captain. He is at Dayton Country Club in the Southern Ohio section. So Matt, when you started the 2020 season, how did you go about preparing for your practices and your games? Did you rely heavily kind of on the back to golf and the PGA Junior League guidelines? What exactly did you do to prep?
Good morning, everybody. So for us, for me, it was a lot of back to golf, CDC, county regulations, heavily more on the county, what we could and couldn't do, because as we pushed everything back further and further, it kind of gave us a little bit more time to get more organized and come up with a game plan as to what we wanted to do. For me, when it came to practices, I would, I could separate everybody in the teams, or I can put everybody away. One could be short game, even though we use the driving range for a full swing area, I just use it for short game strictly. So I have 2 short game areas. I can separate everybody, and they could take turns. You'd have to take turns to hit balls, or you could. One thing I did kind of later on was created like a ball zone. So I would put maybe 10 golf balls in a square for each player. And they'd have to stand up there, and they'd get their ball, go hit it, come back, each person, just as a way. And it would be a way just to play a game, but also just to kind of keep them away from each other, but also say, hey, look, who's got this many golf balls left? So it made it fun, but also kind of made it like, all right, stay over there. Don't do anything too crazy. At the end of every practice, I'd have a hand sanitizer in my cart. So, at the end of practice, I would just like, hey, one by one, I tell her, even though I'm going to send it in the email later on, I'm going to tell that kid one-on-one probably what they need to do, this, that, and the third. And then I'd be like, all right, here, give me a hand, wipe it down, and we will go off. And, just kind of, all right, here's what we got to do. In regards to just our matches, I only had to host one match, which was a little, probably would say a blessing, but a curse because I think I would love to host. But it made it easy for me to get it right. The first, just kind of make it all perfect. So for us, it was how do we want to do, since we're a private club, how do we want to let reciprocal clubs for cart fees, how do we want to let that happen? So to minimize people coming in and out, I just had one of my bad guys take a sheet of paper, take a board, write down their member number, the last name, and then at the end I would just go back and charge it later. That way they don't have to go inside unless they just have to. The cart's already there, they can grab the cart, kind of do that. We'd separate each team. Each team would have their own section for a match, far enough away where I can yell to do announcements, but close enough where, everybody can hear, and then we can kind of go and get out in an organized fashion.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt. You mentioned the very first thing you mentioned was key is, I was very cognizant of my county guidelines, and it's funny because early in the year, I remember, like, for example, I worked very closely with Chelsea in Michigan and Stacy in Indiana, and I see Brad from Ohio on the call, and I worked very closely with them. And I remember early in the year, it would be like, ooh, the Michigan governor's having a press conference today. Ooh, the Ohio governor's having a press conference. Like, I don't know how many press conferences from governors I watched this year, but it was a lot. And, it was like every week I was watching these press conferences trying to figure out who in my territory could do what and who in my territory couldn't do what. And, it was very interesting how many times things would change just from week to week to week. So, that was the first thing you mentioned, which to me was perfect because that's the number one thing that you've got to pay attention to as well. I love everything else that you shared there. That was fantastic. I've worked with you long enough to know you are a really, really good communicator with your families. And when you look at communicating with your families this year, was there any certain way that was most successful for you? Like, did you have any sort of a video meeting, or did you just get on the phone and make phone calls, or did you email, or was it more like when they showed up for practices, you went over everything? How did you communicate to your families this year? What worked best for you?
Well, let's start back from, let's say, pre-COVID. So for you to be a part of the team, we start invitation only, and then I'll be like, all right, we'll reach out, because there may be a kid that I may not have seen, or a kid, we may get a new member, and that junior wants to play, and he's probably played before, and I'm like, all right, great. So it starts off with like a letter. So with me being in college coaching years back, I would draft up a letter, and it would just say, hey, here's your name in big bold letters in blue or orange. And, hey, here's our season. Here's what I want to invite you to this. And I'd sign it, handwritten with, hand signature. And I'm like, okay, I'd put it in the mail like a letter of intent. I'm like, all right, here, hey, we want you to be here. And then so if you need me, then we go from the contact email to phone calls, and just as we got down. So as we got down the road, just, all right, well, we want to do a Zoom meeting. Well, we're not sure who's all in. Well, once I figured out who everybody was and who was in, and once we had our roster completed, I send out probably one of the biggest emails ever. Like, it's big. I'm like, okay, here's what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. This is what it kind of looks like. It could look like this, but it probably won't be what you're used to for some of the veteran parents. Newer parents, this is what it's going to look like. Things can ever change. There's going to be ebb and flow, and I'm going to make sure that you know what to do and how to do it. When it comes to matches, in the email, so that parents don't forget, or the kid doesn't forget that what color jersey to wear, because that will happen. Or the parent will forget more than the junior. So I put in the email, we're wearing blue, in blue font, blue bold, and probably another size bigger than the actual print. And then, and where we're playing, and the details, what time I need you to be here. This is where we got to do, like, hey, we're going to be, carts will be available at this area, or when you get there, just come find me, and we'll kind of navigate you through it, just to kind of keep everybody organized, and, keep everybody at distance as best possible. I'm not going to police them, but I'm going to make sure I'm kind of going to give them a look. I've got my wife. I was just thinking, like, my wife's basketball jersey there, so I'm going to give them the old Pat Summit stare. Like, I know you know what I'm talking about. So, like, come on, help me out here. So, it was all about big communication. So I'm always emailing every week, if there's anything, the smallest thing or the biggest thing. So it was just constant emails, constant details. And I would always just, if it's probably the utmost important thing, I'm going to highlight it. Or I'm going to underline it. And just so people can make sure they see it and kind of put some type of reaffirmation in the brain that, they need to take it a little serious.
That was awesome. So you said three things there that I loved. Number one, I love that you send out invitations through the mail to your players to join your program. I think that is awesome. And as a family or as a player, I just think that would mean a lot to me. Hey, my pro took the time to put together a letter, sign it, on it, put it in the mail. They actually really want me to be a part of the program. So number one, I love that. Number two, I already mentioned what a great communicator you are. And to me, what I hear from parents is oftentimes communication can literally be the thing that will either make or break their entire PGA Junior League experience. And so I love also that you will put in big blue letters and highlight it. We're wearing blue jerseys. Like, that's really important. And, instead of just putting in, just little bitty, we're wearing blue, hey, make it big and put it in blue. Like, those are just little details that, like, really, really add up over the long haul. And then the third thing that you said that really made me laugh is Matt is like one of the nicest people in the whole wide world. So I'm going to imagine that if Matt gives you the stare down, that you are not doing something you're supposed to be doing, that you are going to stop right now.
I actually yelled at one kid. It was like, it wasn't like mad at you. It was more like, hey, don't do that, because it was part of the scramble. He was going to putt. Missed it. He took the first putt, and he's going to tap it in for par. And I'm like, the parents are like trying to, and he's a good kid, and he's probably one of my favorites. And he's like, and I'm like, I scream his name, and he just looks, and I'm like, just back away. And he backs up, but he comes over. I'm like, hey, look. And his parents are like, you just won him over. He's like, because he knows you're not mad at him, but you know that, hey, he knows he probably shouldn't do that. I was like, yeah. It's like, and we talked. I was like, look, I wasn't mad at you. I just needed your attention for 2 seconds. And then so he's like, all right. I went on and he won the match, and I'm like, all right, great. All right, let's go get something to eat.
I can only imagine. Nicest guy in the world gives you the stare down, and you're going to pay attention. That's what happens. So those are the three things that really stuck out to me. I really love the detail that you're putting into the communication there that you're doing with your family. I think that's awesome. One more question for you. Did you find that it was difficult at all for your kids to actually understand and follow the physical distancing? Like, did they catch on right away and it was all good, or was it, you felt like you were constantly like being the hall monitor and pushing the kids to opposite sides of the hallway? How did that go for you?
It was pretty good. I mean, I never really had to worry about that. Kids are gonna be kids, they're gonna click up, but at the same time, I'm like, they understood, like, all right, we can't be too close, but we can kind of hang out and talk. I'm like, you can talk to each other and be spaced out, so it's not the end of the world. When it came to just probably doing matches, probably not. I mean, I'd have one kid mark the ball down, like Laura said. We just, hey, if you mark the ball, you get the ball marked. If just be patient, be cognizant of what you guys are doing. So don't get the ball marker if it's not yours. Don't grab each other's tees. If you're in the cart, like nobody's in the cart. If you're in the cart, if you're not in, one of you can't be in the cart, then wait, and then one of us will come back and get you. Don't worry about it. It's not the end of the world. No, you can't ride in the back of the cart. Our biggest thing, my tradition, you've probably seen it, that big floppy Aussie hat that I always wear. for each match, they would hit my hat. I would hit their hat. They'd hit my hat. So I'd have to change that because I'm like, Matt, we're gonna hit your hat. I'm like, no, you're not. I was like, hit your own hat. I'll hit my hat. That was like, all right, let's go. Let's get going. Let's go win this match. So we just had to, readjust our gaze, and it's, hopefully we probably won't have to, but for them it was still fun. I tried to make it as fun as possible. I told them if they won the match, I'd go buy them ice cream. I think I did. I think they may have won it. I know we lost one match, and I think I was a little upset. And I was like, all right, guys. They're like, you can't be mad. I was like, dude, I haven't lost a match ever. I was like, so we need to, So they won it and 1-1. I'm like, all right, come on, you guys want me at Dairy Queen at this time? I'll buy everybody ice cream. I brought my dog with me, so they were all happy to see that. I'm like, and luckily it was all outside, so I didn't have to worry about going inside or doing anything like that. So that kind of rewarding them and showing them they can be responsible outside of the golf course and on the golf course kind of gave them a little bit of just some positive feedback, and just going down the road, just knowing what to do later on in life.
That's awesome. I love your stories. I have one more question for you. Based off what Laura said earlier today, is they kind of did like a handshake contest. Usually for PGA Junior League, that's one of the biggest teaching moments that our captains have is, hey, when the match is over, whether you win or you lose, everybody's going to go up and you're all going to shake hands and congratulate and all this and that. And that teaching moment was kind of disrupted with COVID because you can't go shake hands anymore. So was there anything in particular that you all did this year at the conclusion of your games to kind of acknowledge the other team?
Mostly just like air fives. I tried to teach them the house party dance where you do the shuffle with your feet. That didn't work. And so just, simple things. They wanted to do the touching putters. I was like, no, because you got to touch it anyway. I was like, at some point, everybody's touching it. I was like, just air five or, throw a peace sign, do something like you think is fun. I've got some kids that are just super animated, so I'm like, all right, find something that you can do that at the end of it, you guys can say, hey, good job, thanks, and go, kind of in the match. So without doing a fist bump, and one of the kids like, can I do a backflip? I was like, if you don't tear the green up, yeah, I don't care.
If I had to do a backflip to we would be in huge trouble. Massive trouble. Even a car might be a problem.
Oh, I wouldn't make it. I'd be hurting too.
Raquel, how about you? Did you all have any sort of kind of non-handshake, or how did you all close out your games?
Yeah, we just did kind of like a wave sort of thing too, but I tried to focus in more on like actually looking at the person and saying like nice playing with you, which I'm going to try to hit that hard this year, like actually making eye contact and saying like it was nice playing with you, because that's just as good of a lesson as, shaking someone's hand. I feel like shaking someone's hand, technically you could just be looking down and like shake their hand and not even acknowledge them. So I'm going to try to focus on that this year. And usually at the beginning, like at the first match or two, I'd have them practice shaking hands. Obviously, we didn't do it this year, but so I think this year I'll have them practice, like looking someone in the eyes from 6 feet away and saying, like, nice playing with you. So just a good skill for them to have.
I like that. I had a pro say to me the other day, he said, one thing that this whole COVID thing has done is he said, with people wearing masks all the time, he said, in all honesty, he goes, I never ever realized before how many beautiful sets of eyes are out there in this world. He goes, I feel like I'm looking people more in the eye than I ever had before, because it's the only thing you can see, is their eyes. And so I love that maybe we can start incorporating what you said is, hey, let's look people in the eyes and talk to them a little bit. So I appreciate that. So both Matt and Raquel, those were some awesome best practices that you just shared. So that was fantastic. I would love to open it up to questions for Laura, Raquel, or Matt, any of them. So if anybody, wants to put anything in the chat area or just unmute yourselves and ask a question, now would be a great time to do that. I'm going to give you just a second there to do that if you'd like to.
Kim, while they're doing that, I do have just one more best practice I thought I'd share. So for our other junior program, we have younger kids. And so for them, we did need to really make sure they were distance apart and doing that well. So I just thought I'd share some pictures. Chelsea, this is probably familiar from a grant review. But we have scorecards for them that they have games that they do on the back of this, but it was color-coded. And they each had a set color, and it was the same every day they came. And then we had these colors on alignment rods, so they would come and stand at that color when they got there. They knew exactly where to go. When they walked, they'd stay in that same line and go to another color, like if we had it at the bunker or the range, wherever, they knew exactly where to go. For putting, we had some braided stainless steel rings, so we'd say, okay, here's your spot. You need to stay in that spot, only one person, in a circle at a time. So just some little things like that really helped for younger kids to make sure they were staying where they needed to. So I just thought I'd share that.
I love that. I think that's great. That makes it very simple for them. And that's perfect, because then to me, when you keep it simple like that, then that means you don't have to keep explaining to them where to go. They know where to go, which gives you more time to actually teach them. So I like that. I think that's really, really good. So if there's no more questions, I just want to say really, truly, just a huge thank you to all of our guest speakers today. So Laura, Raquel, Matt, all of you did a great job. Love what you're doing at your facilities, not just during COVID times, but all the time. And the communication that you two have shown with your families is a big part of the success, I think, that you're experiencing with the program. So congratulations to you on everything that you're doing there. I encourage people to continue visiting the Captain Resource Center on the website, because best practices are constantly being added in there, and you can always learn something by visiting that Captain Resource Center. Remember that your section staff members are here to help you just as much as I am, so if you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to either your section staff members or myself. We are more than happy to help in any way that we can. We will put the recording of this webinar and the other webinars we will have for you if you'd ever like to see those as well. Couple things, action items for those of you that are on the call that have not done so already. Number one, if you haven't already registered for PGA Junior League, do so now. We are having record-breaking numbers of kids register right now. I mean, literally, we are just skyrocketing with the number of kids that are registering. So register now as a captain, because there's huge demand, and you will get kids registered probably pretty quickly. Number two, if you haven't looked into it yet, we did do some webinars earlier this winter on the new PGA Family Cup opportunity. So feel free to reach out to your section staff and myself if you're not sure what that means, or if you missed that webinar, we will be happy to share that opportunity with you. And then the third thing is, if you haven't already gone to the PGA.coach website and learned about the American Development Model for golf and the 7 different stages of development to kind of create a lifelong golfer, I highly suggest you do so. It is an incredible resource for you. So those are the 3 action items that I would give you if you haven't already done them, or if you're interested in them. I'm here for you. Your section staff here is for you. I know Matt, Laura, and Raquel really well. All 3 of them would be happy if you reached out to them to help you in any way as well. So thank you so much for your time today, and all of us wish you a very successful 2021 season. So take care.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, everyone.